Welcome to the Choose to Be podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. You are with me today. Alana's not here. She is taking a much needed vacation. And I know a lot of you have some vacation time coming up with the holiday season. And as fun as the holidays can be, they can also be really, really stressful. So I want to encourage all of you to start making your plan, your self care plan. But have you ever heard the term radical self care? I'm going to talk about that today. And I want to invite you to explore what this might look like for you, as a lot of you have some intense things coming up, as you've already got some intense things going on. So I think talking about radical self care today hopefully gives you a little head start onto the upcoming busy season. But radical self care is this deep, intentional, and I love that word, intentional form of self care. Normal, regular self care that we talk about a lot, that's going to involve activities that are aimed at maintaining and improving your physical, mental, emotional, maybe spiritual well being. Where radical self care is going to dive deeper into the root causes of stress. We want to see what's underneath all of the dissatisfaction, frustration in that emotional turmoil. I want to start with pillar number one, awareness. When we're talking about radical self care, first and foremost, we need to start seeing into ourselves, like really noticing what your beliefs are and how they might be limiting you. What are your values? What are your desires? What are your desires for the upcoming season? What are your fears? And what are some unresolved emotions? This kind of self exploration, the purpose of it is to uncover the underlying cause of that stress and unhappiness that you might be feeling right now in preparation for the upcoming stressful holiday season. Radical self care also is going to emphasize living in alignment with your core values. So, I think this is another great time to redefine, realign, and recommit with your values. How many of you, after the holiday season or after the year, the end of the year, you're like, I'm never doing that again, or I'm going to do that differently all the time, right? At least for me. And we do that mostly because we've done something that didn't feel nourishing, fulfilling. It didn't align with our core values. What a great time before all of this crazy holiday stuff starts, which kind of has in the grocery stores, but with all the decorations, but starting with really redefining, realigning, and then recommitting to these values during the holiday season. Maybe it's going to help you make those decisions coming up, like whose house we're going to and whose house we're not going to, or what I'm going to make, how long I'm going to stay in the kitchen, all of those things, right? Let your values guide you. So, again, in this pillar of awareness, let's be aware of how we might not be aligning to our values. What does that look like in past years? What is that going to look like this year when maybe things are different? Maybe things aren't the way that you ideally would like them to be. So it's even more important and critical to decide what your value is and how you want to align with it through the chaos of the season, which is probably added upon some already chaos of the situation. Another thing you can do in this pillar of awareness around radical self care is perhaps writing out what your expectations are. Now, expectations was like a bad word for me in the past, but there are realistic and healthy expectations, especially in a couple bubble. So if that coupleship isn't whole yet, we want to get really clear about what our realistic expectations are going into the holiday season. I think sometimes this is where we want to challenge some of those perfectionistic tendencies and embrace your beautiful imperfection, because that's not wrong or bad. You hold so much emotional attachment to the holiday season. We want it to be flawless. We want the days to be perfect. We want our children to feel really, I think we're all just searching for that joy, the joy that does come with this season being present. So, what is actually realistic this year, given the situation, given what your capability is, your energy level is going to be, the circumstances allow? Okay, let's move into the pillar of acceptance. Now, if we're going to talk about radical self care, then we're going to talk about transformational acceptance. In my pillar of acceptance, I've divided it into foundational acceptance and transformational acceptance. The latter is this deep dive into accepting things as they really are, seeing things as they really are, and then starting to shift into the agency pillar of here's where I'm going to take this. Here's where I'm going to choose to take this. Here's what I'm going to choose to believe. You're kind of leading into that shift into your agent power mode. So here is where I want to challenge you to practice accepting you for who you really are and how you really feel right now and going into the holidays. Embracing the reality of the situation. Maybe it's embracing the reality of how things are going to be different. Maybe this is your first holiday season where things are different, whether the relationship is different, maybe your partner's in a different location, maybe we're not doing some of the same activities or traditions. And I just want to validate how grief will accompany that different. So, here in transformational acceptance, radical self care is radically accepting the reality of you and the reality of the situation, and practicing self compassion and unconditional self love along with it. Here in transformational acceptance, while self care practices can help alleviate stress and start to help you feel a little bit more relaxed, radical self care is going to address those deeper emotional wounds and trauma. We want to seek to heal those emotional scars caused by betrayal, abuse, and other forms of trauma. And a lot of times, holiday season holds a lot of memory of trauma because there's so much to do around this season. We can get caught up getting so busy that we are avoiding those emotional scars. So, with this idea of radical self care, we want to look at it. We want to look and see and address those deeper emotional wounds. When you think about the upcoming holidays, when you think about all the things that maybe you used to do that maybe you don't see yourself doing this year, get out your journal, start writing, and start connecting with your body to feel all of those emotions that come with this, which leads into another form of radical self care is challenging those limiting beliefs. So, acknowledging the thoughts that are creating these deep emotional wounds and accepting that they're there, validating yourself why they're there. Transformational acceptance is challenging those because it does limit and hinder your personal growth and happiness. So, I want to encourage you to question those self defeating thoughts and replace them with empowering ones. You have all the power to experience the holiday season the way that you want to. When we're giving power to other things, other people, maybe we're giving power to an expectation that isn't realistic right now, then all of that and all of them hold the power over our experience. So, here in this transformational acceptance, we're taking that back by seeing things as they really are, staying in our control bubble, and choosing, which leads to the next pillar, agency, choosing what we want to do with that. First and foremost, radical self care is setting and maintaining those boundaries. This is non negotiable. What a great head start you're getting to set firm boundaries going into the holiday season. I want to include setting boundaries with yourself. And this is one that I've had to do the last few years. This might be I'm not going to be spending 17 hours in the kitchen cooking for everybody. I'm not going to do that anymore because I know what experience I want to have, and that's not it anymore. So, a lot of this radical self care on setting firm boundaries has been setting firm boundaries on myself and what I have expectation of myself during this holiday season. My kids love it when I cook. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I went to chef school and I have a baking and pastry arts diploma. So my kids love, love, love it when I cook and I bake. I used to do it all the time before my divorce. And even though I can sometimes get in the mood and whip up something super yummy, it's not my favorite thing anymore. Kind of like moved on. I think the 40s did that to me. When I go into the holiday season, putting this expectation on myself, like, for example, I found myself saying, I'm not a good mom if I don't cook everything from scratch like I used to. So, there, I'm challenging this limiting belief and I'm setting a firm boundary with myself around an expectation. I have to determine for myself first what I expect of myself and then show up that way, which again aligns with my values, right? Kind of all goes together. This is also a great head start to think about boundaries with your partner, boundaries with your children, boundaries with family. Maybe your financial situation has changed and you need to set some firm boundaries with your children, guiding their expectations perhaps around the upcoming holiday season. I know none of our human brains like change. So, any change to especially a holiday season when there's been traditions here in the Pillar of Agency, I want to invite you to choose to feel grief. Feeling grief when you have loss in areas that you might not have realized that are coming up with this season, you get to feel that loss. You get to feel grief. Radical self care is allowing yourself to feel it. Radical self care is not about quick fixes or momentary happiness. It's really aimed to cultivate sustainable happiness because it's rooted in your self awareness, your self acceptance, and your profound sense of purpose as a creator. Own your agency. Take responsibility for your experience through the holiday season. I want to encourage you to be an active participant in how you want to experience this. I love the holistic healing approach. And radical self care takes the holistic approach to well being, and radical self care takes that holistic approach. It's really when you start considering all of the interconnectedness of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of your life. True healing requires attention in all of these dimensions. So again, write those down: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and go through each of those different parts of you and put together your holistic approach to the upcoming season. Radical self care means you're giving yourself permission to pause and reflect, to pause and feel, to pause and become aware, to pause and reflect on what is and what isn't. Maybe the what isn't part gets to have grief accompany it. Betrayal trauma already brings upon a lot of what isn't. What we thought was, but isn't. What we were told to believe isn't believable. So giving yourself permission to pause and acknowledge the things that aren't is also radical self care. One of the things I love about the end of the year and the whole season is I just feel so much more love. And I know a lot of you are really good at loving, but are you good at loving yourself? You're going to have a difficult time loving anyone if you aren't giving it to yourself first. One of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou is, I don't trust anybody that says I love you when they don't love themselves. I feel it's safe to assume that many of you want to show up this holiday season for those that you love in a loving way. You want them to feel that for you. Radical self care is deciding for yourself how you want to show up, how you want to feel, and what you want to think going into this holiday season. I'll tell my clients to not just automatically believe everything that their brain offers as a thought. So take some time to really choose what you want to think, especially when there is a situation or people that you cannot control that you'd really like to, but you can in the next coming months. Get back in your own control bubble, radically accept what you cannot control, and then radically take care of yourself. I want to offer you a couple quick questions that you can ask yourself as you're trying to figure all this out, when you're trying to figure out what kind of experience you really do want, when you are trying to decide what traditions to keep going, what traditions to let go, to start new traditions, to do something different the rest of the season with this season, all of those thoughts, right? When you're trying to figure all of that out, ask yourself, what is the pain, or what is it costing me to continue in that pattern, to continue in that tradition, to continue in that expectation? What is it costing me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, all the things, right? Then ask yourself, what are the benefits? What would be the benefits of making a change or a shift in my expectation, in my belief, in a tradition? What would you gain if you made those changes? Spend some time letting your brain go to the other side of this. Then perhaps asking yourself, if I continue on with this maybe unrealistic expectation, if I continue on not setting a clear boundary or creating a new firm boundary, continuing to go over to the in law's house when I know what happens every single time I leave miserable, whatever that is for you, ask yourself, how am I benefiting by continuing those patterns? What would I gain by maintaining that status quo of not changing? Spend some time there thinking. This one always hangs my clients up a little bit because if it outwardly looks painful and you know you've experienced pain, but you're still doing the same thing, There's a benefit somewhere. We just want to see it and look at it. And then the last question to ask yourself is, what price has to be paid? Or what cost has to be paid in order to make that change? What would you have to face? Maybe fear, maybe some doubt. Take those questions, journal them out, get curious, drop into that beautiful curiosity, and take that with you as you decide how you want to radically step into self care for the rest of this year. Own your agency and your ability to choose how you want to show up the next couple months. This is radical self care. When you become the chooser, it is freeing up so much space in you, so much of that catabolic energy that you are freeing up when you become the chooser, when you let go of absorbing what other people's expectations are of you or what other people think you should or shouldn't do. Letting go of that is freeing, it's choosing, it's self care. And as always, if you're looking for additional support, especially when things might be amping up a little bit, please go to chooserecoveryservices.com and reach out to someone who can support you in your radical self care because you really are the choosers of how you heal, how you recover. And as always, keep choosing you. Take care, everybody.